We're going to talk about, because I know Renee is has extremely strong views on this sort of thing. The BBC, we learned yesterday, is going to give its prestigious Female Footballer of the Year award to an obscure Zambian striker called Barbra Banda, who basically has a very high male testosterone level. I don't know whether to call her or he or she, but Barbara looks one hell of a lot like Bob Banda or someone like that. Looks like a bloke, it really does. A lot of people saying so. But another person who's campaigned on this issue tirelessly, very impressively, is our Olympic swimming legend, Sharron Davies, and she too joins me now. Welcome, Sharron.
Hello, Kevin. Hi. Sorry I couldn't make it yesterday. I was travelling back from London, but
yeah,
it's nice.
No, we were all feeling
carry
for
on
you.
the story a bit.
Yeah, we were feeling for you. I know what it's like when you're in traffic. Now, Renee's here as well. So let me ask you first, Sharron, what you made of this. I know that you tweeted, this is bloody ridiculous, which pretty much sums it up. What strikes me about this Barbra Banda, first of all, who'd ever heard of her, him, Zambian striker? They've gone out of their way to find this person, haven't they? Just so they can ram it in our faces and say, look at us, we're modern and woke, and all you Neanderthals are going to object just because she has got a very high testosterone level. Why have they done this? Why have they done this?
Honestly, Kevin, don't ask me. I mean, I am so disappointed. You know, of all the hundreds of fantastic female footballers around the world, they have to pick somebody who's male to win the best women's footballer. Let me just not pick on her in particular, and I'm calling her to be polite, but what we have at the moment is a situation, particularly in Africa, where male DSD, which is 46XY5ARD, all right, this is what is in the CAS reports, the court cases when Caster Semenya took World Athletics to court. This is the problem that we have. So this is a DSD, sometimes called intersex. It's wrongly called intersex because it infers it's in between sexes. It is not. 44XY5ARD is a male DSD. It only affects biological males. It means when they're born with internal testes. They're picked up in Africa, they're looked at, and they're gone, oh, we can't see any testes or any penis. They must be a little girl. Off they go. If they were born in this country and there was any ambiguity, they would be given a blood test, then they would be given probably some small surgery, and they would be brought up as boys, as they actually are. Now, what we're finding now is that these African athletes are being fast-tracked into boxing, into football, into track and field. Just take the Rio Olympics in the 800 metres. The first female in that race, in the women's 800, was fourth. There were 3 males that were on the podium. That's ridiculous. So, I mean, it's just insane. So what I want to sort the problem out across the board is just to bring back sex screening. Yeah. So that 51% of this world that are biologically female will have a category which is just for females. And let's be honest, that means that 49% get their category over here. So they stand a better chance of winning than 51% over here, right? All we're asking for is that biological females get a fair and level playing field and an opportunity. And what we're also finding now, of course, is because women's sport is getting more exposure and more finance, then that's the biggest reason to cheat. Yeah. You know, whether that's going to be in boxing or football or wherever. I mean, this particular individual is on a £2 million contract in America at the moment to play football. And this is money that should be going to females.
Exactly right. And as you said yesterday in your tweet, I'm so disheartened and disappointed. This is about the BBC. They are actively cheering this unfairness on. Again, your question to you, Renee. I know you've got strong feelings about this. I mean, obviously, we're essentially talking about the unfairness of letting males, people with high levels of male testosterone, either born male or biologically male, play women's sports. That's very unfair. And Sharron is campaigning to end that quite rightly. But why has the BBC gone out of its way Well, to choose this person that none of us had ever heard of.
Well, they've ticked so many boxes with this one, haven't they? They've got someone from a very poor country who's made it, you know, into the stratosphere in terms of money, as Sharon's just pointed out. They've got someone who's black, and they've got someone who effectively fits the whole LGBTQ, whatever it is, you know, messaging that they've got. So they've ticked all of those boxes, and Sharon's absolutely right. We've got scouts now across Africa actually searching out these people, and it's actually quite sad because they don't have the DNA testing or the technology that we have. They do grow up until they hit puberty with everybody around thinking that they're girls, and then suddenly, boom, they hit puberty because their internal testes start producing testosterone. But Sharon, there's something that crossed my mind this week over this. Where are the women's football team in this country, the Lionesses? Why are they not coming to the fore and standing up and saying, no, we only want women in women's sport, and we're the face of women's sport. We're going to actually bat for women.
Yeah, because they're scared witless. They are absolutely scared witless of their sponsorship contracts, of the FA. So the FA only recently banned a young autistic 17-year-old girl for asking if there was a male on the opposite team, bearing in mind putting a male on the opposite team will increase her risk of injury, who had a beard. Now, because she asked this question, she was banned for 6 matches. All right. So this is the situation that the FA are putting our players in. Even here in the UK, we have 75 that we know of, males that are competing in the Women's FA League. We don't know of a single female that's stealing a place from men. So it's just women that are constantly being asked to give up. And bearing in mind, Kevin, that only 4% of the sponsorship dollar across the world in sport comes to women, now we're not even allowed to have that. I mean, it is extraordinary how much discrimination is involved in this against biological females. I'm so upset because obviously I was around during the East German era, you know, where for 20 years these young East German girls were pumped full of testosterone through no fault of their own. The IOC looked the other way for 20 years. Many people lost out on many, and many of those East German girls have died because of those drugs. And here we are doing it all over again. And I am just so incredibly disheartened and disenfranchised by the IOC, by the FA, by all these governing bodies that are just scared witless of doing the right thing. And we need to start taking law cases. We need to start going to courts over this.
And what J.K. Rowling quite rightly said that by giving Barbra Banda this award, the BBC is effectively spitting on all women's faces. Why are they spitting on your faces, Sharon? Why are they doing this?
I don't know. I mean, you know, as Renee's just said, don't ask me. Honestly, I do not understand for one moment why the sports department or why the BBC seems to have such a vendetta against women. I mean, at the moment, they are literally throwing out a drag program or a drag article every single day on their websites. Now, I find drag incredibly, incredibly insulting, right? It's a parody of a woman.
Agreed.
There would be no other parody that would be allowed to happen in society, whether you were black, disabled, Chinese, it would not be accepted. And yet every single day women are just supposed to go, oh, this is okay. You just carry on.
So I tell you why they're doing it, Kevin. It's because over the last decade and a half, all of these companies, the BBC included, have signed up to the Stonewall Champions League.
Right.
Stonewall have infiltrated their training. They've convinced all of these young people that what they're doing is kind and right and the right thing to do. Stonewall have now been chucked out of all of these, but it doesn't matter because they've got their little proteges in there.
The seed has been planted.
The seed is planted and it's self-perpetuating. So all of these young wannabe wokies are now running the show, and this is the result. And that's why they're throwing out a drag programme every day.
And ironically, Sharon,
what they don't also get, Kevin, is that this is not kind, right? I mean, I have parents. I have parents of young sports girls, particularly football, actually, who write to me every single day, telling me that their children are dropping out of their sport. They're self-harming because nobody is paying any attention to them. No one seems to be on their side. They've been made to play against boys. They're getting injured. They're having injuries which are actually literally ending their sporting careers, and nobody is prepared to listen to them. How is this kind to turn around and say that women are not entitled to their own category of sport? You know, no one wants anyone to be banned from sport. everyone should be allowed to have access to sport, and we should encourage it and build it and make sure it's even better than it is, because it's not terribly good. But it just needs to be fair. And the most sensible and simple way to do it would be sex screening, which is a 10-second swab to the inside of your cheek once in your lifetime, because you cannot change sex.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Lest we forget, I remember you and I talked about it, Sharron, the Olympic Games back in Paris, that Algerian bloke who punched his way to the female boxing gold. We remember that poor Italian lady stepped into the ring. Bloke walks in, sort of one punch, she goes down like a deck of cards, and crying. It was really distressing to see.
You know what's really fascinating is that this particular footballer started out in boxing, won every single bout, knocked out 3 women, and then turned around. Nobody would actually box this person, so then they went from being a boxer to being a footballer.
Oh, God. See, the thing is, if you remember the Algerian boxer, got very high and mighty about it and started criticising it, because we all said, but you're a bloke. I am not a bloke. He threatened to sue people left, right and centre. Anyway, subsequently, it was proved he was a man.
Well,
he was a man.
He failed 2 sex tests, which was why the International Boxing Federation will not let them box, because they realise that it's a massive accident waiting to happen and they will be responsible.
And it's not fair.
What I find extraordinary is how the IOC have got away with this. I mean, because it's willful negligence to put a male that they know is a male, because they were sent those results 1 year prior to the Olympic Games in Paris, and they knowingly put a biological male in a boxing ring with females.
Yes, I said at the time, who knew that wife beating would become an Olympic event? And this guy, or this person, this footballer, Barbra Banda, in 2022 was withdrawn from the Africa Cup by Zambia, by her own team, because they knew that he would fail the tests.
Gender requirement,
yeah.
Absolutely. And what's important to understand is it gets a bit technical, okay, but when you talk about male levels of testosterone, they're so much higher than women's levels of testosterone. So the average female, even elite athletes, myself included, are under 1 nanomole of testosterone per litre of blood. The average male is somewhere between 7.1 and 31. So they have a massive range. We only have a small range. But the lowest men are on 7, and the highest women, even with endometriosis, are on 2.5. But most Olympians are under 1. So that's how different it is. So once a male goes through male puberty, there is no removing those benefits whatsoever. And in fact, actually, I'd argue that even going through male puberty, yes, that's one side, but there's a thing called a Q angle, which is the angle between your hips and your knees. So, for example, female footballers get 6 times as many knee injuries than males, because our Q angle is almost twice the size. And that means that the cadence, the power that you can put through your legs on something like cycling or running is so much better when you're male than it is when you're female. And that's just part of your bone structure. So none of these things can be suppressed or changed.
Absolutely. Let me ask you about this. I think maybe to counterbalance this extraordinary situation, the BBC proudly announced, it was all over the front pages of the paper, that the Sports Personality of the Year will, for the first time, be hosted by an all-female presenting team. Alex Scott, Gabby Logan and Claire Balding, all excellent presenters, all excellent broadcasters and all that. But, they're trying to sort of project an image of equality, but they never seem to get anything right. Now, there's 2 things about that. Where is the equality in 3 women and no blokes? And it's sort of patronising, isn't it? Oh, look, we got 3 women doing it. How about that? The BBC just seems to be all over the place when it comes to these issues, doesn't it?
I think we have to be really careful, because I'm obviously very pro-women and I'm very pro-equality and sporting opportunities. However, there are an awful lot more male spectators of sport than there are female. And that's just a fact again, all right? So we need to deal in facts. If we're not careful, we're going to end up men getting very cross with us because of this bias. And actually what you should be doing is making sure that the people in the jobs are just doing the job on merit. Now, those 3 presenters are excellent presenters, don't get me wrong. I work with Claire and Gabby all the time.
Nothing against them, nothing against them.
Yeah, absolutely. But there needs to be a guy in there. There just does.
It makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense.
But even F1 have done it. So if you tune into F1, on Sky, you get 3 women. I've said to my son, who's in F1, there are hardly any women in the pit lane. I'm like, why do I have to watch 3 women? Why can't there be a man there?
Where are all the Formula One women racing drivers?
Yeah.
One of them is a driver. She's an Indy 500 driver.
I think in the end what we're talking about is, you know, we're all old enough to remember when, you know, these kind of issues were dictated by common sense. The common sense prevailed, you know. So the Olympic Games, or you know, Sports Personality of the Year, you know, you didn't have males taking part in female sports. So common sense is what's died a death, and the epicenter of this insanity, which is what it is, seems to be the BBC, which is kind of worrying.
Yeah, and actually, you know, people talk about there being a growing presence of women's sport on television. Again, that's not really true. I mean, the team sports have grown, so we are now showing more football, more women's cricket, more women's rugby. But with regards to showing women in other sports, there's a lot less of it. So when I was competing, swimming was on television 4 or 5 times a year. We would know who the best badminton player was. You know, we would see a lot more track and field. We just don't see it. No. You know, we do not see that mixture of sports and you know, men and women winning in different activities the way that we used to.
And also, the other thing to remember, and I'm sure Sharron will back me up here, is that winning Olympic golds is very lucrative, and countries want to do it.
Yeah,
so it pays these countries, if they can get away with it, to actually source these men who look like women and win more golds.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the sad truth is they don't really look like women, do they? You know, we know looking at them they don't. You know, we knew looking at Caster Semenya that this person wasn't biological female. We all knew it.
Yeah.
You know, it was just getting to the point where we, you know, somebody would stand up.
Look at Barbra there. Look at Barbra. I mean,
yeah, you can tell from their physique. They can tell from the way that they walk.
That's a bloke. That's a bloke.
She has no breasts.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, Sharron, I think, you know, it's been a bad week, but don't give up the fight. You're always welcome on this show.
Thank you. I'm going to keep fighting for our girls. You know, I've got a daughter. I've now got a granddaughter. They deserve their opportunities, and I am not going to stop fighting for them.
You and me both.
Yeah. Here's to you, Sharron, and thanks so much for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you to you, Renee, for your participation in that important debate. Let me know what you think about what Sharron said there, what Renee said. It's got to stop this craziness, hasn't it? Why is the BBC cheerleading for this nonsense? Cheerleading for men to take part in women's sport, which essentially isn't fair, and worse than that, it will kill off women's sports, and we don't want that, do we?